Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We got Matt Taibbi on the show. He's going to be talking about a pretty provocative piece in the New York Times arguing that Joe Biden is winning right now because he is a man. So Taibbi's going to talk about sexism on the trail as he's seen it in covering any number of presidential races. We also have Jeff Stein on, of course, great economics reporter for the Washington Post. He's going to break down what is the state of play right now in terms of the next stimulus package, and that is, in fact, where we want to start this morning.
Yeah, that's right. So let's throw a tear sheet up there on the screen, actually written by Stein and many of the others at the Post. Here is what is in what they're calling the HEALS Act, and I won't even bore you with how dumb of an acronym it is. The L stands for liability, which tells you everything that you need to know. Anyway, basically what this is, we have to focus on the very key part, top line. What is the part that affects, the tens of millions of American workers who are on unemployment right now? So the current version of the Senate bill scales back unemployment to $200 per week in the immediate near term, I think until October. So after October, what it does is that it will then be capped at 70% of the worker's prior income from before this period. And it will also have a cap, I believe, I'm told, of $50,000. So if you made more than $50,000, that cap essentially cuts off near that mark whenever you're replacing 70% of your income. Now, this is dramatically important because that unemployment money is basically fueling the entire economy.
It's flooded the entire economy.
Literally the entire economy. Stocks, equities, retail sales, restaurants, everything. Goldman Sachs, many others have actually said, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon had said that the reason that his bank actually didn't end up having to cover as many losses as they thought is that customers were able to make payments on credit cards and on others specifically because of the unemployment money, which they can see going in and out of their customers' accounts.
Yeah.
Right? So this is very critical to the state of the U.S. economy right now. Now, in terms of the makeup there, the kind of what I've been talking about here, which is okay, you want to accept the premise that this is going to limit employment and that much, then you need to make that up on the other end. It does include the stimulus check. Very good. $1,200, $75,000 cap of 2018 tax salary.
Just like the last time around, they didn't mess around with that,
Exact same as the last time around. I very much expect the Democrats to go for that one. But there's no back to work payments here. There's no makeup of lost income. So it's hard to overstate the amount of lost income that's about to hit the U.S. economy. I mean, $200 per week from $600 per week, dramatic drop,
yeah.
Right? And then an additional scale back. There is no evidence that there is any economic engine that is going to make that up. The government is basically the only shortfall there. So this is the part that I'm especially worried about. Now, the Republicans, they put in the liability. That was, that's the red line.
Corporate liability, Chamber of Commerce, and everybody's been lobbying
they have
for
to
that.
have the liability. They have gotten their liability. The other big fight is about state and local aid. And so this one is, they basically were left out of the bill entirely. Now, I've made some calls. I've really been trying to understand. I'm like, why are they so opposed to these state and local bailouts? Basically, conservative states, Florida, Wyoming, others are like, we do not want to pay for New Jersey's failing pension system or Kentucky or California and others. And I was like, once again, there has got to be a way in order to say Wisconsin and, or California doesn't have to fire teachers or sanitation workers, and also just not allocate that money to pensions. And yeah, you're right. You said this before. Pensions actually affect actual workers, and a lot of Wall Street crooks are
the reason that those pension funds are failing.
But yeah, let's even leave that fight aside, right? That's coming, 5 years down the line. There's got to be a way to make sure. I mean, there are millions of people who work for state and local governments. They're one of the largest employers in America. So.
They did this, too, with the airline bailout. They wrote that part of the bailout so that the money was going to guarantee that workers kept their job at least for the length of time. Now, it should have been extended, and that's a whole separate issue. But clearly there's a way to do this so that you could say, look, this money is going to come in to keep jobs, because we had Stephanie Kelton on, economist associated with MMT, and she pointed out a study from the Economic Policy Institute that I looked up yesterday that projects if you don't bail out state and local governments, you're talking about 5.3 million layoffs.
There you go.
Mass layoffs, completely avoidable. So the fact that that is left down is absolutely unconscionable. on the unemployment piece, it's just so mind-boggling that what you're fighting about and what really upsets you so much is the idea that working people might be getting a little bit of a break here. And the reason that they put the $600 plus up in to begin with, just if we go back in some of the context here, is because they wanted to make sure people's full income was basically replaced.
And that they would stay at home.
Right, and that they would stay at home, of course. But it was too complicated to go in and say, okay, we're going to replace 100% of the income. Most state unemployment systems will replace somewhere around 45% of your income. So to do the calculations was more complicated than just saying, you know what, we're just going to give everyone a flat $600 plus up. That has been remarkably beneficial, even though the whole structure of the policy of pushing people onto unemployment was stupid to start with, but it has helped to float the economy. So on the one hand, they're so upset about the debt and the deficit and how much we're giving away to working class people. On the other hand, you know, they throw in there a couple $2 billion for new FBI building. They throw in there some money for their own health clinic, fancy health clinic that's just for members of Congress. This is from Lee Fong's reporting, who actually, you know, went through the appropriations and saw their A1I, $400,000, their exclusive medical clinic. Oh, by the way, they've increased the funding for that clinic 3 times now in the last year. As far as I know, there's nothing in here about any of your health care. How many of you are out there struggling to make a COBRA payment because you've lost your job and no longer have health care, health insurance? So that's not covered here. Another thing that just points out the absurdity of the priorities is they decided to add in a deduction for meals and entertainment expenses. I mean, I can't decide whether I am more outraged by the fact that this obviously targets like corporate executives with fat expense accounts.
It's honestly worse than that.
And it's so absurd because it's like, what meals? What entertainment?
It's worse than that.
Pandemic.
It's all a Trump obsession from whenever he used to own hotels.
Of course.
That is what it is.
Well, and the FBI building is a Trump thing too, because the FBI building is next to a Trump hotel property and he wants to keep it there rather than their plans to move it out of the city, which would have been cheaper. Let's just listen to Larry Kudlow talking about some of the things that will be in this bill.
There will be increased business deductions for meals and entertainment. The liability restrictions are an absolute must. But the fact is, you can't spend your way into long-term prosperity. And I'm hoping over time, this summer, maybe there'll be additional bills, and certainly the president's reelection campaign. We simply must talk about investment incentives for entrepreneurs, large and small businesses, and more regulatory rollback, which the president himself is very, very keen on.
Regulatory rollback. That's what they're really focused on, as if that's going to do anything. Like the problem is too much regulation right now. It's absolutely insane. And here's the thing that is so bizarre is you and I have been reading like the Wall Street analysts. They're not on board with this.
No.
Like they actually are looking at the number. Normally it's like the Wall Street people who are all on board with the deficit hawks. No, they actually see the numbers and how much of the economy has been floated by these stimulus checks, which I'm glad are going to be actually in this, and the unemployment. And they're like, you got to do something or we're all screwed. But they are so ideologically trapped by the last 40 years that even though many of their funders and corporate interests actually want them to do more, and certainly, my God, the American people want them to do more, they can't get out of their own like ideological bind on this
So
thing.
here's something very interesting. This is from my conversation with the people on Wall Street who will still talk to me. And they made a really interesting point, which is that the big divide in the administration is between ideological actors like Kudlow and Stephen Moore, and then people who have actually played in the market at the highest level.
Like Mnuchin.
Steve Mnuchin.
Yeah.
That's exactly who they pointed to. They're like, look, we know, Saagar, you hate finance and like all this, but the guy knows how money is actually made. He understands that markets are in some way, not in a total way, a reflection of real-time economic activity. So that's why Mnuchin pushed the stimulus payments. That's why Mnuchin has not been outspoken necessarily beyond what the administration has been telling him to on the unemployment, because he very much understands the time between consumer discretionary income and actual equity prices. And I was like, wow, that is a dynamic I'd never even thought about, where the Wall Street guys, because they understand understand how much income floats the economy and not the other way around are the ones who are like, hey, look, like we really got to make sure that people are getting, consumers are getting taken care of. I never thought that this would be a dynamic.
It's insane.
That would exist.
When the Wall Street people are like the ones that are most in touch in the administration, well, you know you're in trouble.
It totally makes sense because these are the people who, make hundreds of millions of dollars off of all of this and they financialize everything. But at the end of the day, they're not complete idiots in the way that people who actually think, as Moore and many other people, Republican senators, believe, that the current spending is actually what's depressing the U.S. economy, right? Like, that takes a level of delusion, which is just so obviously not true.
The ideologues are immune to facts and data.
Yes.
It does not matter what you put in front of them. It would not change their view one bit. You always point this out. Like, the answer to every problem is a tax cut. It's like, cut the payroll tax. Or capital gains. At least they realized that one was going to be definitely a non-starter. But it doesn't matter what situation you put in front of them. It doesn't matter what data you show them, what charts, what graphs. It does not matter what situation you are in. They will always advocate for exactly the same thing. And so at least the Wall Street people have some vague connection to what is actually going on in the country. It is a sad state of affairs that they are the ones within the administration who actually are taking the best line right now. And look, the stakes here are insanely high, okay? Let's throw up here from CNBC what it looks like. Evictions coming, the likely impact in each state. You can see the darker blue states have more renters who are at risk of eviction. There is wide variance across the country. In West Virginia, I think I saw that a majority of renters could be facing eviction. In other states, it is lower numbers. But we've seen estimates that tens of millions of Americans, up to 30 million Americans, could be facing eviction. Now, the administration, in terms of federally backed housing, that eviction moratorium is going to be extended. But we should be clear. I mean, that is set to expire. That piece has to be in here, or else you are going to have those millions of people also facing. That doesn't cover anyone, though. But let's take a listen to what the administration, this Larry Kudlow, again, is saying about the eviction moratorium.
Just one clarification. The moratorium on evictions, that's for federally financed, Fannie Mae, FHA homes. They're forbearing. They will continue forbearance. So there will be no evictions in that sense. On the other side, on the rental side, we're still looking at that. We're still working through that. But one important point, the $1,200 checks will, of course, help people avoid eviction. So federally financed single families, absolutely no eviction. They're still in the forbearance stage. As far as multifamilies, we're looking into that, but the $1,200 checks will provide relief. That's what I was trying to say yesterday.
So some homeowners will be protected if you have federally backed mortgages. If you're a renter, you're more vulnerable. They're apparently hoping that the $1,200 check will be enough, which it will help, I'm sure, some people
also an additional
to stay in their homes.
I want to make sure that we give them some credit here, which is they made it so that if you have adult dependents who lost their jobs and are staying at home, you can also get that dependent check that you would have gotten when you were kids, which is very helpful. I want to praise them in this very small, minor way.
40% of renter households, though, according to analysis, are at risk of evictions. As I was saying, 60% in West Virginia as compared to like 22% in Vermont. And here, this just to give you some sense of scale and perspective here. In 2016, all of 2016, there were 2.3 million evictions. Analysts are saying we could have that many just in August. Just in August. So that's the scale of what we're facing right now, and they seem to be concerned with figuring out what's the least amount of help they can possibly give people.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we should end really with this, which is that, all of this is dire. There are some decent things in this bill, like the stimulus checks. I mean, I don't think the unemployment is great. There's an investment fund out of the Small Business Committee, which is actually good and brings back some domestic manufacturing, but this is a wasted opportunity. This could be a chance to remake the entire economy. Why have we waited? It's July 28th, and we're still talking about this. It's going to take another week at least for negotiations and other things to pass. And Americans are really left holding the bag, right? Wondering the uncertainty for businesses, for workers, for so many others. It's a catastrophe to the average American life. And as we just looked to somebody who always really understood what was happening here, Andrew Yang. He was on CNN recently, and he had this to say. Let's take a listen.
America clearly has the resources to be able to make families whole and give people a secure path forward right now. We're just putting that money in the hands of the big companies and the banks and not our families. So that's what we need to change. And if we do that, we have a chance to still avert a Great Depression, because we can see that this crisis is going to keep on rolling on and on in the United States for months.
That's exactly right. And he talks to you about how, 10 years of change is being accelerated here into a very short period of time. And, it really goes to something that he centrally raised during the campaign, was this myth of scarcity. This idea that, oh, sure, we'd love to solve homelessness. We'd love to make sure everybody has a dignity, but we don't have the money. Well, that lie has been completely exposed through all of this. It's just a matter of priorities.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we'll tell you what's on our radars. That's nice.